The proposed amendment to our city ordinance before you tonight deals with catering permits. Under Idaho code, the city has the authority to require anybody who wants to sell alcohol within the city to be required to have a city license. They're required to have a state license and a county license, and the city exercises the authority to make them get a city license. And if somebody wants to get a temporary license to be able to sell off their premises, off their licensed premises, that's the catering permit, and we have a process for that. What brought this issue today is that there's been a different trend, or a growing trend in this community, across this country actually, on microbreweries and wineries. Especially in this region, they seem to be a growing industry, and they seem to contribute or be contributing to the local economy. We had a request this summer from a nonprofit group that was hosting an event, wanted to allow a microbrewery that doesn't reside within the city but resides within the county, and wanted them to be able to cater the function. But under our city ordinance, the way I read it, is that they would have to have a city license before they could get the catering permit. The proposed amendment before you tonight would say that for a catering permit, if somebody has a state license and a county VLATA license, then they would be able to get a catering permit to be able to serve functions or festivities within the city of Moscow if they are qualified under Idaho code as a brewery, and they already can do that as a winery under state law. At the administrative committee meeting, we had a discussion about whether we wanted to limit the amount or who could be qualified for this under breweries, whether it be microbreweries or any breweries. Under state code, there's a differentiation between just a brewery like an Anheuser-Busch in eastern Idaho versus a small microbrewery. And the cutoff level was if you made 30,000 barrels or less, you'd be considered as a microbrewery. Basically, under the state code is that goes towards tax revenues or how much required tax you have to do. So we thought maybe that might be a break if we wanted to limit it to a certain amount of barrels, keep it to the small mom-and-pop microbreweries. The administrative committee decided they thought that anybody who qualifies as a brewery should be allowed to do that. So the amendment before you here tonight includes, if you qualify under the definition of a brewer under the state and you have a state license and a county license, that you would be able to get a catering permit. Then one other thing I wanted to point out in the ordinance, talks about a difference about how the duration for the catering permits. State law, we did this a few years ago, extended from 3 days to 5 days. Our city code was amended to make it up to 5 days. But under state code, wineries can get a catering permit up to 7 days. So we made the distinction in here that if you are a winery, and if we have some kind of event, that they could get a catering permit up to 7 days. And so with that, I don't think I have anything further. It would just be amending to allow if somebody has a catering or eligible for a catering permit if they were a brewery or a winery licensed in the state of Idaho.
Okay, as you said, Rod, this was reviewed by the administrative committee on November 27th.
Mm-hmm. In our discussion, we ended up talking that I think Art said it best. So, Art, would you like to kind of encapsulate your
You want me to
thoughts?
remember what I said?
Yeah, you did. I mean, we just talked.
a week ago, Art.
Well, we just talked about that we didn't want it to force people to have to choose micro breweries.
Yeah.
If I remember.
And he was also very jet-lagged.
I was. But the upshot was that it seemed to be somewhat micromanaging the desires of the people who want to put on the festivity and to allow them to decide who they wanted to do the catering and without any restriction. And also the fact that although it doesn't seem likely in the near future, there's always the potential for a local brewery to go over 30,000, and then they would be aced out despite their local locations. So we thought that it would be wise just to let sort of a laissez-faire and let the organizers do the deciding of what they wanted to have catered.
And so we brought it to the council to see if you thought that was a good idea or not, and this would be the time to talk about it.
Sure, absolutely.
I think it's a great idea because we have a big proliferation of wineries and breweries in Lake Hawk County and Nez Perce County, and I think in the spirit of cooperation with all the businesses in our local area that this is a great ordinance that helps us cooperate with them and expand business. It helps us all.
Jeannie, you had a comment?
I think this is one of those moments, sir, where we're really putting our money where our mouth is. We say we're open for business, and this shows it, and it makes it a very common sense, good approach to things. So I'm very in favor of it.
Randy?
I was in that administrative meeting as well, and I agree with what Catherine and Art have said, and would like to not have restrictions based on the size of the brewery. I also, in thinking about it a little longer, just in general, I think it's somewhat unusual with catering events here. Most people tend to go to local businesses who already have their catering permits and then get whichever type of beer or wine they want, and sometimes they want microbrews and sometimes they want the macro brews. So I just think more choices, more options can meet the needs of everybody and what they have in mind. So.
Okay.
So with that, I move to approve the proposed amendments to City Code, Moscow City Code Title 9, Chapters 6, 7, and 8 to allow breweries and/or wineries located outside the city to cater within the city limits with an alcohol catering permit under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that it be read by title and published by summary.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Catherine and a second by Gina to approve the proposed amendments of Moscow City Code Title 9, Chapter 6, 7, and 8 to allow breweries and/or wineries located outside of the city to cater within the city limits with an alcohol catering permit under the suspensions of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that be read by title and published by summary. I'll start to roll with Art.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
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 Okay, now we have an ordinance 2017-14. An ordinance of the City of Moscow, Idaho, a municipal corporation of the State of Idaho, providing for the amendment of Moscow City Code Title 9, Chapters 6, 7, and 8, relating to alcohol catering permits, and providing that the provisions of this ordinance be deemed severable, and providing for this ordinance to be in full force and effect from the date of its passage, approval, and publication according to law.